So you have gains in economic productivity because of the accelerated timetables and the technologies that enable that. As consumption grows in size and diversity, new middle classes emerge. They're fairly homogeneous at the moment in many of these markets, but they are changing. And we'll get to some of those preferences which relate to cultural and nuanced, you've got religious and you've got other value systems at play that change that. And Western companies are moving into emerging markets. They already have. And in fact, this is my take on the world. There's no facts that support me here, so you can take this what it is. If you take the period from about 1950 through to 1990, that's when you started seeing textbooks write about globalization. It wasn't globalization, it was Americanization. There was very little traffic coming the other way. A couple of European or Japanese companies tried. It was really about American companies going global. You know, all the tech titans, the IBMs and the Intels and the HPs and even the later ones like Cisco's and all of the packaged goods companies, the Procter & Gamble's and the General Mills and the Krafts of the world, Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all these iconic American brands that globalized over this period. Now, the laggards on that have no choice but to go. So you're seeing a number of American companies, particularly with the current lack of capital, lack of liquid capital in the capital markets. They can only go where they can get a fast return on capital. And two, they've got to go where there's almost guaranteed growth. Doesn't mean it's not hard to execute against that. So suddenly you're seeing this resizing of portfolio of economic significance for many American companies who are going internationally. But now that the global road, the global highway is being built, you're starting to see huge amounts of companies that you've never even heard about coming to the United States. I mean, has anybody ever heard of Haier? No? Haier in China is, if you like, the Whirlpool of China, only it makes a lot more. It makes TV sets, it makes almost every single consumer item in China, and it's coming your way soon at half the price of whatever you pay.
How do you spell
H.
H-A-I-E-R.
Go and Google it. There is, you've all heard of the famous handset manufacturers, you know, the Motorola's and the Nokias and the LGs and the Samsungs. There's a company in China called ZTE. You've probably very rarely heard of because it's not on any handset you'll buy, and yet it produces more handsets than all of the other guys put together because it own labels your handset. If you buy a BlackBerry in Portugal, it's probably a ZTE. If you buy the cheapest phone in any range or any telco in the world, it's a ZTE phone. And they make every single kind. I've been to the factory, and you can see 700 different phone types. And you can literally go in there as a telco and say, I'll have that one in red. And it'll be out by the end of the day, and you'll have whatever numbers you need. And it's the largest. But just so you don't think it's not just a mass producer, this company employs more postdoctoral scientists, PhDs, than the entire tech industry in the United States employs. So they're coming your way soon. And they have global ambitions or regional ambitions. When I was in the Middle East recently, I was speaking to some senior Arab business leaders, and they were describing what their ambitions, and they feel that they have a problem coming from the Arab world. So they've decided, they call it K to K, which is not quite genetic, but it's K to K, which is Casablanca in Morocco to Kazakhstan in central. And that's their ridge, and that's the zone that they're looking to play in. So we're seeing a whole lot of brands come out of these markets that will be coming your way soon. And the nature of global branding will be very, very different. The nature of global reputation will be very, very different. And the Chinese influence just can't be underestimated. If you go back to all those countries that I showed you at the beginning, there's two things. Let me just flip back to the first slide. There's two dimensions relative to those countries. The one with all the populations. Stop right there. Okay. So there's two things here. With the exception of the United States and Western Europe, because Norway's not on here, it's too small a country, almost all the world's sovereign wealth funds come from this part of the world. it's very hard to get real estimates of what a sovereign wealth fund is worth, but broadly the consensus comes out about between $4 and $5 trillion, of which the largest two in the world are the two Chinese funds and the one fund out of Abu Dhabi. $4 to $5 trillion. Could you imagine if somebody said you have $1 trillion, what do you want to do with it?
That's the Chinese problem for like the latest thing, isn't it?
Now the Chinese have a double problem here because all of their wealth, all of their assets is in US dollars, which right now is one of the declining currencies of the world. Not quite, but it's in US bearer bonds, and that's how we won't say manipulate currency, we'll say that's how they leverage their currency. That's the first dimension, sovereign wealth funds, which is also driving asset purchases, not necessarily company purchases, but land, property, minerals purchases around the world. Second dimension is, and I'll get to one of these afterwards, if you look at these most populous countries, particularly the fastest growing popular, what do you think they have in common? What's the one factor? I won't make a judgment about this. What's the one factor they have in common? You've got to hazard a guess? Muslim population. Not many people know, but China has a very, very significant Muslim population in the Western Autonomous Region of China. You don't hear much about it, but it's a very, very significant Muslim population. India has the third largest Muslim population in the world. We'll ignore the United States for right now. Indonesia is predominantly, almost not 100%, but closely Muslim. Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Philippines has some, Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, Turkey. So the case I'm starting to establish is that not only do we have a whole world that's changing in a very brief period of time, but the drivers of those change, which is wealth and population, but it's also a change in dynamic relative to politics. It's also a change in dynamics relative to religion. A lot of these issues are now all suddenly going to be global issues. They're no longer contained within one or two countries. I'll go back to the next piece. So this was broadly, if you like, there's two sides of it. There's consumption, production. And I consider this a consumption part of the presentation. I think the production one for communications people is more interesting. And it's really to do with a hyper-connected world. And there's been a lot of sessions here I've seen on social media and the blogosphere and the internet and so on. And you're all living this because you're all in professional communications. Let me just put an X factor on the top of it so you understand the global dimension. This is where the current internet users, and most of that's PC-based internet users, so fixed line, rank around the world. So already China has overtaken the United States. It's predicted, but who knows, these predictions always vary, but by 2015, Chinese will be the dominant language of the internet. So at the moment, English enjoys a, not quite a monopoly, but it's the powerful language of the internet and the world. These are the things, look at India. It's 81 million already, but there are 600 million cell phone users in India. Once they go to broadband, within a reasonable period, we're talking maybe 2-3 years, 200 million people in India, probably the same population as the United States, will be effectively on broadband mobile. As we come into even behavioral uses, so many people say, well, we don't know where these emerging markets are going to engage with social networks. You know, Indians don't know what Twitter is. You know, well, they do, because one cricketer, remember, in India, still largely 2G, you've got a cell phone, and the most functionality of that cell phone has a texting capability. That's what you have. That's what most Indians have. India's mad for cricket, which is an obscure sport, which I'm not going to bother to explain to anybody here in this audience. They're mad for cricket. And the top cricketers in the Indian clubs are bigger than even the quarterbacks in American football or LeBron James. They're just huge in terms of that country. They have paparazzi, they have models, they have lavish lifestyles. One cricketer did a tweet. One cricketer did a tweet. Had 1 million followers within a 2-hour period. So social networking has arrived in India, not through a Facebook or MySpace or any of these things, but through a text-based mechanic. So this is where the growth is. But the interesting point on this point is not the size of population, because the big 3 or 4 are still the big 3 or 4, although Brazil may once again surprise you. It's the penetration. And we'll move on to the next one, because what we did is they're all very different. So to understand them, to understand how people are producing ideas and content around the world, is the flip side for where the growing consumption is. And we're very lucky to partner with TNS, and we launched this on 10-10-10. They're very proud of that. It was an inspired decision to launch it. And it was looking at internet usage, networking usage all around the world. And it's probably the largest definitive study that's taken place relative to online usage by country around the world. And I'm not going to do it justice here. I'm just going to give you some top lines. If you want to go on and look at TNS online and you want to play with some of the data, it's an educational experience. I spent several hours on it, and I'm still trying to learn. It's huge about what's common in our world and what's separate in our world. So this is the first piece. The first piece is basically, if you look at the percentage of online users who have started using the internet less than 2 years ago, it's not surprising that in the developed world, it's pretty small. But in the last 2 years, this is Middle East and in India, you're starting to see massive growth of first-time users. So in 2 years, and given that most of these countries have less than 30% penetration, the next 2 years, we should see another doubling of that. Next one. Ask the question, in an online world I can better express my feelings, the emerging part of the world really feels that. Now that's interesting. We don't understand what that really means. You could certainly suggest there's some meaning to it. You could certainly suggest that many of these people have felt that they were not empowered in their societies for political reasons, for cultural reasons, for religious reasons. And that now has come into an empowering tool, which is the online world. And many of them are gravitating towards the fact that I am empowered and I can express my feelings, my thoughts, my ideas. So that's why I call this the production economy. This is the new engine of productivity. Let's go to the next one. And social networking is truly mass market. There's a large perception when I talk to people in the West that this is really just a Western thing. It's kind of an elitist thing. It's moving out. But really, it's pervasive. This is a percentage using of social networking daily or ever. And I'm just going to focus on the daily. What you've got is a near half population, broadly across that. And the most staggering thing, daily use in China is higher than North America or Western Europe. Daily use. So we like to think we're very sophisticated here. We like to think that we're living at the edge. Well, in some ways, the Chinese are living at the edge. Next one. And if you look at the mobile penetration piece, this is PC versus mobile. So above the line on the green is the mobile, and below the line is the PC piece. And what you're starting to see is that you're seeing massive growth in mobile, particularly as mobile goes on to broadband internet, which is what you're already used to if you've got a fancy smartphone now. You're already used to that. This is coming the way of all these emerging markets in a 2 to 4 year period. So could you imagine? I mean, let's just pause for a sec. We're throwing lots of numbers out there, but we're sitting here, and in 5 years' time, in 2015, the world will be radically different. I mean, it's already different, but it'll be so radically different. If the revolution in Iran, the green rallies of Iran happened in 5 years' time, I wonder what would happen. I wonder what happens to any political regime. I wonder what happens to China. I wonder what happens in India, in Pakistan, in Turkey, those places which have significant military leverage in their countries, in the Republic of Congo, Ethiopia.